Welcome to the Bangalore Business Literature Festival's first initiative, the New Book, New Chat. The purpose of this series is that to give new authors and authors of new books a platform to engage with readers, their readers, and new readers, so that they're able to discover uh, new books and many books that are being published. This is a new platform that we have started. Hope it takes off, and we want to do it as a monthly thing. But if we can get comfortable with how we run this, we may even make it a fortnightly or even a weekly going forward. The larger purpose is that we need to stay connected and engage readers, authors, and enhance the ecosystem of publishing and interaction with authors and readers. You were with ISRO and you started your career with ISRO. What was your high point? You were in the satellite uh, design and other very exciting um, exciting launch of ISRO. So just chat with us a bit about your experience at ISRO.
Sure, Benedict. Thanks a lot. Actually, just out of the college as a rookie, I was fortunate to join ISRO in Bangalore, that too, in the satellite center.
Mm-hmm.
And the first experience itself was I was working on a satellite program. We were working on making digital systems in the satellite. And I was fortunate to be again in the one of the people who we wrote the first software that went into space from India. And that's how my career started. But the high point is first seeing such a launch happening. It's unbelievable that we work on a mission in front of us, thousands of people working on a project to make a satellite and a rocket. And then we put together, we go to Sriharikota, launch it, we see the launch happening, we see the satellite in the orbit, we receive the data from the ground station. For fresh engineer out of college, that's an unforgettable experience. And I would say that's a high point I will never forget in career where I started with ISRO.
In fact, it's a kind of coincidence. As a journalist with Economic Times, so I used to cover aerospace. I had a chance to see one of the PSLV launches when Dr. Kalam was heading the mission. So that was very interesting and exciting. I would say one of the high points of my journalistic career as well.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah, so it was quite exciting. We say design thinking, and we think it is new for India. I think the success of ISRO is largely because of the design thinking. Uh, their ability to do big projects at such a frugal budget requires design thinking. Without that, they couldn't have done it, isn't it?
Absolutely. I think the design thinking is not at all a new concept in that sense. It has been various forms being talked as design from 1950s, 60s, it evolved, and in 80s and 90s, it became the buzzword, and now it is practiced widely with the startup ecosystem much more now vibrant. But basically, if you look into what is design thinking, is actually empathize with the end user, humanistic approach, the customer, and most importantly, in the ISRO context, I would say it is about doing small experiments. Now, don't keep on building something without doing experiments. Do that actually close to the end environment, simulate it, check it, validate, and move forward. A simple thing like if you are putting a satellite with a solar panel in the orbit and it has to generate power on its own and power the entire satellite, how do we test it on Earth actually? We used to have solar simulators which will simulate the intensity inside a chamber, or we used to have star sensors because the satellite orients itself by sensing certain stars. Those kind of things and all, everything was simulated. We do small experiments and develop the subsystems of a satellite and integrate the satellite, test it in a vacuum condition, in a thermal and vacuum condition. It's endless actually. It takes months to do that, but that is how we make a quality, robust product in incremental way, test every step, and then finally launch it. And that is the success how ISRO has always come up.
Yeah, I think that's really wonderful. Moving on from ISRO to Bosch. So, what was the highlight of your career one factor I see, which is very outstanding, is that typically innovation people or scientists, they slot themselves and remain in the R&D till they retire. Uh, as I see your bio, you have been a business head, you have been an R&D head, and so head of, I mean, you're head in Germany and US as well. So you are a kind of a complete person, like a which a CEO actually needs, a well-rounded, holistic thinking. So I'm quite amazed at how you've been able to craft yourself into a complete professional.
That's a good one, Benedict. Actually, by nature, I keep changing jobs within the company. Of course, I've been with Bosch for till last month about 21 years. Actually, every 2 or 3 years, I try to do something different. And fortunate that the company also gave me the opportunities. I have played in various new business areas. Various countries have gone and worked actually in US and Germany as well. As well, I had the opportunity to work on multiple functions, like you said, on R&D as being engineering side and as well as the business head, as well as the last 3 years I've been working as leading innovation and incubation of new technologies, new business areas, like a startup within the corporate. So that was possible. And that I would say is one enriching experience for somebody to be getting developed as a holistic
Hmm,
leader, as
hmm,
you are mentioning. I
hmm,
was
hmm.
fortunate, and that is definitely a highlight.
So, were you able to make a difference to the ROI? Uh, because innovators today they are asked to make a difference to the ROI. That's a big ask, but how does it work?
It's another good question in a sense. It depends on what are you measuring as
Hmm, hmm,
return of innovation. If you are measuring in terms of revenue, of course,
hmm,
that's what makes difference between invention and innovation. Innovation has to be
hmm,
commercially successful,
hmm,
otherwise it becomes a technical invention.
hmm,
But in case of innovation, other than the revenue which will flow naturally after some time, setting up the culture is most important as innovation culture. And if you measure the culture, how different it is being set up, definitely you will see a long sustainable method by which innovation can survive on its own. People are tuned to that systems and they are able to continue that. I would say that is ROI to start with. And naturally we have also seen products getting launched, products successful in the market, and
hmm.
naturally the usual measure of success in terms of one which takes time to set up initially.
Yeah, so I think it's a holy grail for every organization getting the innovation culture right. Of course, there is no uh, end to it. It is a process. It is a ongoing thing. So, how do you describe the innovation culture which you have been instrumental in setting up in Bosch? What does it really take, and how does it really affect the design thinking?
Sure. The innovation culture has got various facets. First of all, people should have open mind. What do I mean by open mind is being open to various different ideas, because true innovation happens by joining the dots, as we say.
Hmm.
It's actually interdisciplinary. It is by connecting the dots across. So people have to have a diverse thinking. As in the book which Pawan has written also, we had actually a
Hmm.
role of innovation culturalist in my organization.
Hmm.
And the innovation culturalist role was a person who was a musician, a linguist.
Hmm.
We had actually such a diverse team. Uh, there were people who come from a theater background, people who have historical research, who writes blogs on history. So it was really a diverse team other than the technical experts. That first of all brings diversity in thinking. Diversity is just not gender diversity, but diversity in thinking.
Yeah.
That brings people a vibrant culture, what is called as a Medici effect.
Hmm.
This is
Hmm.
one way that people are able to discuss totally different things across
Hmm.
and come up with great new ideas. That is one of the examples. Other is actually we have to get inspiration from so many things. I used to call it inspiration from nature is one great example.
Yeah.
Nature is a great innovator.
Yeah.
If you look at things like how an ant hill maintains the temperature,
Hmm. Hmm.
or how honeybees and ants find the most optimum route to their food, these are
Hmm.
all things that humans have taken from them.
Yeah.
Networks of airlines or networks of communication have been completely designed based on these kind of principles.
Mm.
So we did a program actually, went into the forest and 2 days we stayed there watching nature, with a naturalist who explained to us how nature
Mm.
has innovated. And actually we could do things later back in office. Actually, one of our bright engineers came up with a great idea how uh, an immune system of human body works against viruses. That's any of the
Mm.
common topic now. Or when a variant virus comes, how does it work? Can we apply the same mechanism how body learns to deal with new viruses
Mm.
in the
Mm.
context of cyber security with
Mm.
AI algorithms? So these are all the things. What happens? How do you connect a human immune response to a self-learning cyber security system? I would say these are all part of the culture. People learn to think differently from the conventional ways.
Mm. Mm.
Another aspect is actually innovation. By definition, everything what you do in innovation cannot become a success.
Mm.
There will be enough, I don't want to call failures, but there will be enough learnings.
Learnings. Yeah.
The culture should allow people to learn,
Mm.
allow people to continue those kind of experimentation methodology.
Mm. Mm.
Also, many times the corporates actually design methods, as Pavan has explained in his book, put so many gates of questioning the innovation and then stopping. That seems to be the main way the corporates designs are there, because they want to conserve the time and resources and money how it gets into. Whereas the tenet of innovation is just the opposite. We should not miss any great idea coming.
Yeah.
So these are the various facets of innovation, how diverse people can come together, get inspiration from nature or various other things, as well as the culture of learning continuously and improvising. I would say these are all some of the most important elements how innovation culture gets set up.
Yeah. That's interesting. I'm not sure why Pavan is having
Is there
trouble
a-
getting it. Um we tried to reach him. I think back end they're trying to reach him. Uh,
Okay.
so, I mean, let me welcome the participants who have registered and come in. Big welcome to you all. Hope you will enjoy this session, and Pavan should be here any moment. Meanwhile, we'll continue our chat with Sri. Uh, Sri has had a very, I would say, interesting is a less of a word. I think an exciting career. Uh, so one that is an offbeat question, which I think the audience would like, is that Sri performs. Is How do you call that? He's a performing musician. He plays Carnatic violin. Uh, so I was chatting with him backstage before this. How does uh, really learning to play an instrument, a music instrument, really helps a person, helps a professional executive or an entrepreneur in uh, enhancing their career, in doing much better in their work, and taking it to the next level, face constraints. So just take us through that journey, Sri.
Sure. Interesting question, Benedict. Thanks for that. It has been my passion. I have been learning for decades now. Even now, I continue learning. I practice every day almost.
Public performance do you do, or it's only
I do
personal?
performances once a while,
Okay.
not to the level that I'm going after the professional side, because this
Mhm.
side is important. But I manage, I balance, and I'm able to do that. Let me start with there's a very interesting question when I reflect back. How does it help, or what are many things to learn out of
Mm,
this kind of a passion? One is absolute commitment required, because any
mm, mm.
instrument to play, to be proficient, to be performing at a level requires commitment of every day. It's
Yeah.
not that once a month or something. It's not like I want to go for a hiking or travel once a month or once in 6 months. It's not like that. I'm in touch every day. That might bring the question of many people ask me, how do you find time to practice every day?
Mm,
My answer will be it's always the choices what we make in a day.
mm, mm,
People call it work-life balance, but I prefer a better word that Jack Welch used.
mm,
It's actually work-life choice, not work-life
mm.
balance.
Yeah, yeah.
We make
Very
choices. A
interesting.
simple example: last 1 year, the pandemic has hit, and more or less, I was working from home, which means savings of 2 hours every day
On
by not
travel, yeah.
commuting.
Yes.
So how do I spend these 2 hours every day? It's again a choice I make. These are all the life choices. You can call it, it is career choices, you can say, or it's professional choices. It helps you to make choices to stay committed. I spent some time on, definitely more on violin. I spent time on improving my fitness. And on the lighter note, also started watching Netflix with my wife to spend some time. So
Okay.
we make choices. I could have also spent the entire time maybe WhatsApping, or maybe spent on learning something like how to trade in the stock market. There is nothing right or wrong. Anything could be done.
Okay.
So I made the choice, I would say, for long decades now I have stayed committed. Now, how does it help me? Let me come from multiple directions. Actually, it is well proven that playing an instrument early from childhood, anyway, I started little later, helps the brain development itself. New connections are formed. It is also kinesthetic as well as right brain activities. That is one. Anyway, that is proven. Scientific papers are there. But what I see practically helps me to calm down, helps me to get into a state of flow or meditative mood. Even whatever may be the agitation, I can just get into my instrument and start playing something. It changes the entire mood. So that is one thing, how it helps me to balance a day. That is one thing to start with. Second is, let me come to innovation. That's an interesting connection you asked about. If you think of music, particularly Indian music, see, the notes are same. The same 7 notes are there in all systems of music. But Indian music has some peculiar things, like it's more improvisation, that to impromptu improvisation, what we call in our music as raga systems.
Yes.
If I call that as a creative activity or innovative activity. But if you look in the background, there are so many constraints. Actually, each raga has got so many rules written down,
Yeah.
written and unwritten rules, current practices. And if you look at all those things, it looks like almost impossible to do any improvisation. But within those constraints, within these boundaries, within that field given, there are in some ragas only 6 notes or 5 notes. Even some ragas have got in the ascent only 4 notes. And you can play around this and create a magic around that.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is what is innovation about. It's not about unbounded creativity, but within the given constraints, which are very important. It happens in innovation in terms of corporate, in terms of, it could come in the form of resources available, it could come in the form of budget available, or in terms of your market reach or your capability. But how do we innovate within the constraints? I would say probably this comes as a belief that we can innovate even within any amount of constraints, I would say.
Yeah. Good. So I think it's Pavan is almost there. He's in the. They're just getting him in. Yeah. So let's start off. What are the 3 learnings that you had from Pavan's book? How to design? I mean, design your thinking.
Actually, one is Pavan, the way he has designed the book is very, very systematic, because the design thinking concepts, there are various books, but the way he has designed it is giving examples, live examples, not only international, but also Indian context, how to apply. That makes it actually relatable in every one of us. I think Pavan is there. I think we should start
Hello,
off.
Pavan. Can you hear me?
My sincere apologies. Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me also?
Yes, Pavan, we can hear you.
So was it a technical glitch or what?
Yeah, my system rebooted and there was some challenge. I'm so sorry for that.
Cool. So Sri and I have been having a chat in your absence, not at your cost though, but yeah. So yeah, I was just asking him. Well, let him finish his thoughts. I just asked him what are the 3 key learnings that he got from reading your book. So I'll let him finish that.
Yeah, I think it's an integrated step-by-step approach, a comprehensive book the way he has given. So somebody can take this book and follow this straight away into how to implement design thinking. And second one I was telling is, there are enough examples, international as well as Indian context, because we are, as we say, we are unique people and we need examples from India. That is. Third is, he has busted many, many myths. Anyway, we'll chat with Pavan on what are the myths about innovation and how he has busted. That will change your fundamental belief system about innovation. Once you change your belief system, anybody can become an innovator. That's what I would say, my learnings out of this book. And I think it's time now we should chat with Pavan more. Pavan, welcome and glad to be here with you.
Thank you so much.
So, firstly, congratulations on a very fine book, Pavan. Uh, I mean,
Thank you.
yeah, so I've been hearing about design thinking so much that it's kind of become a cliche, and people just throw that concept around and use it so loosely. So that was my first impression, even when I saw the cover of your book. But then something
Mhm.
made me to read the book, and it's very, very fascinating. And
Thank you.
it demystifies. Yeah, so I think more than anything, it demystifies and gives a roadmap. Uh, I mean, for everybody, it is not just for the head of innovation in companies. It is for anybody, even individuals, organizations, SMEs, uh, and more than anything, the purpose of what this book has achieved is that it makes for an engaging reading. So it's even if you're not an executive, not an entrepreneur, you just want to read it for fun. I think it's a fun book by itself. So congratulations on achieving that.
Thank you so
Yeah,
much.
and very easy prose and no heavy corporate spiel. So typically, you're put off by the corporate spiel in many of these books, but it is really, really good. So welcome again to the audience, and Pawan has joined us. Let's make it a very interesting session. Uh, where do I begin? So, yes. So before I start off, I need to thank Airmeet, which has been our technology sponsor. Thanks, Kabir, for making it happen. If you can hear me somewhere. Uh, okay, so Pawan has a very super resume, so I won't be able to read the whole thing. So where I'll start off is that Pawan is an innovation evangelist. I think there are not many in India. Maybe you can count on your fingers. Innovation evangelist. So what is the pressure that title brings to you, Pawan?
Okay. So this all started when I was in Wipro, which was in 2005 time frame, and I used to work in the CTO office,
Okay.
Chief Technology Officer's office,
Yeah.
and my role at that point in time was to go around the length and breadth of Wipro across the country and to various other education institutions and socialize the concept of innovation. And I was very fascinated by this person by the name Guy Kawasaki.
Mm-hmm.
So Guy
Yeah.
Kawasaki was a chief evangelist at Apple,
Yeah.
and he used to work with Steve Jobs in 80s and 90s. And the idea was threefold. One is to go and make people believe that anybody can innovate. Second is innovation is methodical.
Mhm.
And the third thing is innovation is not just limited to products.
Yeah.
So I was so lucky to have given the license to go around major colleges across the country from Jammu all the way to down south, and I used to go and socialize. And I just flashed the title to my supervisor Vikesh Mehta at Wipro, and I said that why can't I have this title on my business card?
Yeah.
And he obliged. So since then, my job has been to demystify innovation in every single chance which I get, and I've been luckily carrying this title around. So that is what innovation evangelism is all about.
Great. I think that's wonderful. Um, yeah. So before I let Sri and you engage in conversation, as I'm here as a host, uh, I will ask you one or two kind of an offbeat questions, and then move aside. So
Sure.
let both of you do the talk. Uh, One is that you've spoken 5 times in as a TEDx speaker, and you used TEDx as one of the examples of design thinking in the book. Uh, so, can you just tell us about your experience as
Definitely.
a TEDx speaker and things
Yeah, yeah. I think that's a very unexpected question,
like that?
Benedict. Uh, frankly, and it also shows the rigor with which you have read the book. I'm so thankful to you for particularly that. So TED, when it was started, it was an invite-only event.
Hmm.
It was started somewhere in early 80s,
Hmm.
and when Chris Anderson bought over the rights of TED, he started socializing it very extensively, and that's where the TED.com came up. He started putting videos on the YouTube, etc. For a very long time, what has happened is that TED was a very exclusive event. Though you can watch videos for free, but to be in that fraternity
Yeah.
of the thinkers and doers was a very exclusive thing. And the only TED that happened in India was in Mysore.
Okay.
And we never had any other TED. Only one TED happened in India. Now, what TEDx does is that TEDx is an independently organized TED event, where the license of organizing that event is given to almost anybody and everybody. And I was looking at the number of TEDx events which have happened across the world. Turns out that India had a TEDx event every 3 days.
Oh wow. Yes. In even
And in
small tier
places
2 and tier 3 cities.
very, yeah.
Yeah.
So if the whole idea of TED, which actually stood for Technology, Entertainment and Design, was to discover talent and bring it up to the forum where people can start socializing, I think these guys did a phenomenal job. So that is where the consumers, which is producers and consumers, have come on the same platform. And I've just been a beneficiary of that particular sort of movement. So I think TEDx is a phenomenal example of how the democratization of technology has happened. So that's the example I discuss in my book.
Excellent. Yeah. So I would one last question, and then I'll let you both. So I was fascinated by the fact that you taught liberal arts, Pavan, at SIBM.
Yes.
Yeah. So
How do you know that? Just curious.
it's there on your
Is
LinkedIn
that right?
page.
Is it? Okay. Yes, I
So
taught liberal arts. That's right.
yeah, you taught liberal arts. So I was chatting with. So I was fascinated about this liberal arts that you taught, and
Mm.
also your activity, your evangelist for Speak Make, which is a music organization, promotion organization. So just
Mm.
take us through that experience of yours.
An absolutely unexpected question again, Benedict. I'm so glad because some of the questions that you have asked today are so offbeat
Yeah.
questions that even if in my nth revision of the Q&A, I wouldn't have come across this particular question from anybody for that matter. So thank you for asking that question
Bless
and
you.
bringing that dimension to
Yes.
the fray. So now what happens is, if I look at any management education curriculum, it is heavily oriented towards economics. So if I look at management and draw a Venn diagram, management essentially comes from three disciplines,
Yeah.
which is economics, sociology, and
Yeah.
psychology. And if I look at the number of credits that somebody earns in economy, sociology, and psychology, a disproportionate amount goes on
Yeah.
economics, followed by psychology, and least of it goes into sociology. We hardly have papers on sociology. And I got a chance to teach one is psychology of creativity, and social psychology of creativity, and then liberal
Yeah.
arts. And this is where I would really bring in a lot of perspective from the domains of actual arts and not necessarily music, but all the arts, and then blend it with science and bring it to management discipline. I could even talk to some of the artists, some of the stand-up comics,
Yeah.
etc., to bring in that perspective to the table. Speak Make is where I got introduced very early in my life, and I was doing my engineering, which was in Jodhpur, Rajasthan, and that's where we had this Speak Make society. So I, as a volunteer, would go around organize some of these music sessions, etc. But on the family front, my daughter, my wife, and my mother-in-law. So there are three generations staying together
Okay.
here. All of them are into Hindustani classical music.
Excellent. Yeah.
So we have an environment at home where while I'm right now attending this session, my daughter is having her music class
Okay.
right now.
Okay.
So I think that environment really makes it so
Mm.
amazing
Mm.
to, as Sri said, and I overheard the conversation on the
Okay.
phone, it helps you calm down.
Mm. Mm.
Right. So that has been the impact that I've had. So I think music has had really a
Mm.
tremendous sort of influence on my writing and
Yeah.
thinking.
So I've had a rethink of how the program flows because we kind of started late, and we also need to excuse me, give time for the audience to ask questions. So, with your permission, I'll stick around. Uh,
Very
yeah,
much. Very
yeah,
much.
because we have say
Great value at bringing
yeah. So we have
with the
another
kind of questions.
5-10 minutes before we get the audience. And I would request the audience to keep your questions ready. You can either raise your hands or even ask questions in the question box that is there on the right of your screen. So we will make it more interactive. So please start. So the uh, yeah, Titan. I think you've gone deep into the experience of Titan, Pavan. Uh, so yeah, you also worked there, set up their uh, innovation department at Titan. And then you've given amazing insights into how Titan is not a watch company, but it is a design company. So can you just take us through in a minute or so?
Yeah, while I answer this question, I would also want to hear from Shri because Shri had a
Hmm.
series of questions prepared. So
Yeah,
Shri, if you can, maybe Benedict and Shri can toggle, I
yeah,
think that will be really awesome.
We'll do that. We'll do that. Go ahead.
Sure, sure. Thank you. So I did my summer internship at Titan. Actually, it was a winter internship in 2005, in January 2005, and that is where Titan was onboarding this innovation journey, where they had to bring in technology into watches.
Hmm.
And there was a time when people were really moving away from wearing watches into using mobile phones to keep a track of time. So I had 4 months, and I worked with this gentleman by the name BV Nagaraj. And the task was pretty open ended given to me that Titan wants to set up a innovation department where we can bring in watches more than a timekeeping device.
yeah,
It can be material, it can be aesthetics, it can be features, functionalities, other technologies. And in 2005, mobiles were not that omnipresent as well, let alone the smartphones
yeah.
and whatever smartphones can potentially do.
Hmm.
So I surveyed the various R&D companies across the country, did a bit of reading on HBR, etc., and then conceptualized the innovation department. And I was lucky enough to get a chance to present my findings to Bhaskar Bhatt,
Hmm.
who was then the CEO of Titan.
Hmm.
And lo and behold, that department took shape on that very day. There
Hmm.
was a sign off which happened. So I think in those 4 months which I had spent with Titan, I got a very good hang of what innovation and design is, and that is what led my way into
Hmm.
the innovation at Wipro.
Okay.
So that's been a wonderful time which I had at Titan
Yeah,
during that
yeah. So Sri,
4 months.
please go ahead and ask your question.
Yeah. Thank you. Pavan, as I was mentioning earlier, you have busted many myths in your book, which I find fascinating. Let me read one what you have said. Is
Hmm.
about one of the popular belief in the community is if there is a compelling product, customers would queue up and buy. So how you have busted? Could you explain that?
Yeah, absolutely. So there is a very famous saying, Shri, which says that if you make a mouse trap, people will have a beaten path to your doorstep. And you would not realize that the highest number of patents filed for any product in the world is that of a mouse trap.
Wow.
There is no other product which has more number of patents than a mouse trap. And yet 98% of the market of entire mousetrap industry is dominated by only one design, the design where there is a hook and there is a trap, that flap trap. There is no other design in the world which has the dominant utilization. So now what we have is that we often have this belief that if you have a great idea, people will be compelled to listen to your idea. That's a great myth. And as a result, entrepreneurs, managers, etc., keep working on their idea and start glorifying their idea in their own head. And unless and until they go out and talk to the people and socialize the idea, people have no obligation to buy it from them. Now, if I talk to entrepreneurs, and that's something that you would be doing a lot more now, Shri, in this new avatar of yours, when you talk to entrepreneurs, the starting conversation typically is, hey, I have a great idea. Now, great idea for what? Great idea for who? Unless and until you have a great problem, the great idea has no meaning. And in your years at Bosch also, and before that, and you realize that many organizations are full of ideas looking for problems, right? So I always advocate that instead of having an idea bank, companies should be better off having a problem bank. We need good problems, not good ideas. I think we are dearth of good problems. So that is the kind of perspective I want to offer in my book.
That's great. Also, I remember reading Pavan. You had said is also just not spend time in building the product, but do enough experiments actually to
Yeah,
validate what you are building is right. Could you elaborate some more on that?
absolutely. So one of the interesting realizations which has occurred in the last couple of years is the phenomena that nobody is waiting for your product as much as you think
Hmm.
they are.
Yeah.
The world goes on. There is a very good saying by Peter Thiel, and he says that the only person waiting for your startup to happen is you. There is nobody else is waiting. The world goes on, which means the 100% readiness of your product or your idea is only in your mind, isn't it? There's nothing called 100% ready. Because even if I go with a 70% ready product, the customer might still think it is 100% ready. So I think the philosophy is 70% and go, which is ship and improvise, ship and iterate. So if you can take your product into the marketplace and iterate on top of it, I think that's a phenomenal approach to do it. And the example is my book. Between the time I got reached out by Penguin to write the book and January, so I got reached out by Penguin in the mid of 2019, and I was given 4 months to write the book because I promised to them that the manuscript is good. Okay, so 4 months is what I had. So in 4 months I wrote 0 words to 1 lakh words, and in the next, because of pandemic, in the next 9 months I wrote 1 lakh to 90,000. So the amount of time it took me to go from 0 to 1 lakh words was dwarfed by the amount of time it took me to go from 1 lakh to 90,000. Removing 10,000 words is a tricky aspect, and that is where the iteration comes into play. So I think instead of waiting for the 100% product to be unveiled like this, you are better off talking to the customer and co-creating with them so that you are not outguessing them.
That's quite interesting. Coming back to creativity, Pavan, because we discussed earlier also, but let us hear your views. Creativity somehow looks like an elusive quality. Can you explain what are the proven methods that creativity can be nurtured, and what will be your advice for somebody to be a great innovator?
It's a good question, Sri. So first of all, I would like to submit to my audience today is that creativity is nothing more and nothing less than a skill. The moment I reduce creativity to a skill, all of a sudden it occurs to us that, hey, I can learn it, I can better it, I can improve it, and even I can teach it. And one of the questions I often ask to my audience is that in a physical setting, in a virtual setting also, that please raise your hands, those who know how to swim. Generally, half of the audience put their hands up. Then I ask the question that, do you think that the people who can swim are God gifted and the people who cannot swim are not designed to swim? Now, that's not true. Everybody is designed to swim, but few chose to swim. On the similar lines, everybody is designed to be creative, but only few people choose to be creative. So, creativity is nothing but a skill which can be practiced upon. And three tips which I would offer to my audience today. First and foremost tip is to pick up a hobby or pick up multiple hobbies. The challenge with the hobby notion is that people think that hobby has to be one for a lifetime. I need to have a hobby for a very long amount of time, and only then I can really call it as a hobby. I don't subscribe to that view. Even if you have a hobby for 6 months, absolutely fine. It's a hobby after all. And what's a hobby? A hobby is something that you exclusively take time out for. Hobby doesn't come at the end of the day when you have nothing else to do. Hobby is something that you take time out to do. For example, for Shri, the hobby is playing violin or cooking or having exotic vegetables being cooked and being sort of plants being nurtured. For me, the hobby is reading a variety of stuff. So you take time out. So first is having a hobby. The second thing that you might want to do is to be very, very experimentative. Experiment with the food you eat, the places you go to, the clothes you wear, the books you read, the movies you watch, the genre of those movies, friends, etc. Because when you experiment, your threshold of failure comes down. You are far more accepting that what is failure. Acceptance is far more higher, so that in your real world, when you are failing, you are absolutely fine by failing. So having hobbies, doing experiments, and the third aspect is being very, very curious. I think as child we were curious, but over the years our curiosity has come down. Not because we have become more knowledgeable, but we have developed more inhibition. If we can have the mind of a child and the body of an adult, I believe all of us will be far better off to be more creative. And as a result, creativity is nothing more, nothing less than a skill which can be improved upon. That's my view.
That's great, Pavan. There is one relevant audience question. May I ask that from Dr. Arpita
Yeah.
Janta? How is creative lateral thinking different from or same as design thinking skill?
It's a good question. It's a very good question. So, if I say that design thinking is the only or the best way of problem solving, I'll be lying. It is not the only or the best way of problem solving because there are a whole genre of methods available for problem solving. The word lateral thinking was coined by Edward de Bono in 1972. And it's a very fascinating work which Edward de Bono is talking about. What is lateral? Lateral means sidewise. So if I have to, what he says is that by digging the hole at the same spot, you cannot end up at a different spot. You will only go vertical. So lateral thinking means you change your reference point. And one of the best ways of lateral thinking, and there is a whole range of lateral thinking techniques that talks about, is to make a mistake temporarily. Being logically wrong as a first step is a good starting point of lateral thinking. But the premise of lateral thinking is that you know the problem that you're trying to solve. That's the assumption of lateral thinking. You should know the problem that you're trying to solve. Whereas in design thinking, the assumption is you do not know what the problem you're trying to solve. So the distinction between lateral thinking and design thinking, and in my book I have a very simple 2 by 2 matrix where the problem is known unknown versus solution is known unknown, and I have mapped where is lateral thinking, where is critical thinking, where is lean thinking, and where is design thinking amicable. So in short, thinking is good when you know the problem that you're trying to solve. Design thinking is useful when you do not know the problem that you want to solve, but you only know the symptom. For example, in the city of Bangalore, where I am right now, in the last 1 month, the cases of COVID has peaked. It has almost gone up again. Now, nobody knows why. Is it that people have become more laxed in their sort of precautions? Is it that the virus has mutated? Is it that social distancing norms have been flaunted? Is it that festivities are kicked in? Is it seasonal changes? We do not know. We only know the symptom. This kind of a situation is very, very good to be addressed with design thinking and not lateral thinking or lean thinking. So I think if I have to put this in succession, the first is design thinking where you understand the problem, and then you have lateral thinking where you solve the problem. I hope that answers the question.
That was good. That was brilliant, Pavan. My
Thank
next
you.
question is about, in today's world, the corporates want to embrace the culture of startups. Actually, what is preventing them?
Good question. So first thing is that a culture of startup is not startup, but very few companies have managed to remain startup type even at a large size. One of the company, of course, is Apple. I recently read a HBR piece that spoke about Apple's organizational structure. When in 1997, Steve Jobs returned to Apple, one of the ways Apple was organized is M structure. M structure means multi-division structure. So what Steve Jobs that day itself did, and there were a structure for example, a structure for Macintosh, Apple II, etc., etc. So what Steve Jobs did is he disbanded all the structures almost overnight, fired most of the people, and since then he has made Apple as a functional structure. What I mean by functional structure is there is no head of iPhone, there is no head of iPad, there is no head of iPod. The head is of marketing, sales, engineering, manufacturing, etc. And what he says is that when I am not a head of iPhone, my objective is not how many iPhones have been sold. I'm not bothered about that. That is not what is sort of running me. If I'm the head of software, my objective is how to make the best software. If my head of visuals, my objective is how to make the best visual. So Apple is the best example of a company that has managed to bring that startup culture at a size which is close to $200 billion in revenue and $1 trillion in market capitalization. Three simple tips, if I may. The first is
Yes.
you need to structure yourself very differently. Instead of creating power structures, Apple has only one P&L, by the way. That's also very surprising. The entire company has only one profit and loss statement. So you don't have general managers. Apple has no concept of general managers. Apple has a concept of specialists. Now, when you're a specialist, the only promotion you can get is to be better specialist. But when you're a general manager, you have a managerial cadre and not a specialization cadre. And as many people would acknowledge, after a point in time, general managers are good at managing things generally. That's what they end up becoming. And they lose their speciality, which was once their real strength. So org structure has to be functional instead of divisional. That's one thing that companies need to, so that people have an urge and a push to be better at something. That's number one. Number two, which can be very useful to you, is embracing agility very selectively. Now, the big myth about agility is that we think agility is about doing things fast. Agility is not about always about doing things fast. Agility is about understanding the problem slow but solving it fast. Now, when I do workshops with companies about agile design thinking, they typically want to rush through the problem understanding phase. And they think and they claim that because we are agile, we have to do it fast. No. Agile means you understand the problem slow, but you execute fast. And the reason I advocate that you execute fast is that in the same time and budget, you can execute multiple number of iterations. There is a very interesting research paper by Gartner, and I would advocate my audience to understand that what Gartner has done is Gartner compared agile with design thinking with the lean startup concept, and it has placed them in successive order. So what Gartner says is that when you have a high level of ambiguity, you start with design thinking. When the ambiguity reduces, you go to lean startup concept. When the ambiguity is least is when you adopt agile. So blindly embracing the agile culture of a startup for a large organization might lead to chaos, and that's absolutely not advocated. Yeah. Second thing,
Absolutely.
org
That was
structure.
very, very.
So, do we have any other audience question? We'll open it up.
Yeah, that is.
Let me finish that one
Yeah,
point.
sorry.
So
Yeah, please.
one, yeah. So the first one was the functional structure instead of divisional structure. So which means that you have sales, marketing, and not business units. That allows specialization. Second is agile to be adopted very very selectively. The third aspect is relooking at the tenure. I think big mistake that companies do is that they somehow assume that longer the gestation period of a person, the longer the duration of a person, the more productive the person is. So they often mistake productivity with quality, and that's the reason they always look at relevant work experience. I advocate that why not look at irrelevant work experience?
That's interesting.
An irrelevant work experience would be coming at the cost of productivity, but will really bring a lot of creativity. And whether you talk of startup or large enterprises, we are almost okay with 20% attrition rate. Boss may be an exception that way, Shri, but I think most companies are pretty okay with 15 to 20% attrition rate. So
Yeah.
if startup is having 20% attrition rate, with large companies are having 20% attrition rate, so why to be so serious about who is coming into the door anyways? If the guy is going to leave you in a couple of quarters, you might as well have a very creative person and not a very relevant person. So I think your hiring strategy, your org design strategy, and your execution strategy needs to be relooked at.
That was brilliant, Pavan. That was looking at the irrelevant experience. Really liked it. There is an audience question from Inbavanan asking Steve Jobs stated that a customer does not know what they want. Hence, Apple should create products for which there does not have a need today. What will be your comment? I have read this in the book, but would like to hear from you.
Actually, this is a very misappropriated quote. And so let me clarify that. It's a misappropriated quote. There is another very famous quote by Akio Morita, the co-founder of Sony and the designer of Walkman. What Akio Morita said is that the customer, and before that it always goes back to Henry Ford. The famous quote by Henry Ford was that if I were to ask people what do they want, they would have said a faster horse cart and not a car because people can't imagine a car. What we often do not understand and gloss over as a result is that Steve Jobs himself was a connoisseur. He was a connoisseur. So the best customer that he could serve was he himself. That's number one. So it is not correct to quote him saying that he didn't listen to customer, he was not customer oriented. He was damn customer oriented because he himself was a big connoisseur, and that's why he started off with iPod as a music. Many people say that why Apple started with iPod and Jeff Bezos started with Kindle because Jeff Bezos liked reading books and Steve Jobs liked music. So your personal passion and your personal disposition has a huge weight on the products and services that you make. Second thing is Apple, when Steve Jobs was in India, Steve Jobs was in India for 6 months and during the Hare Rama Hare Krishna mission. When he came to India and then he went to Japan to perfect Zen philosophy, one of the things that came out from the entire understanding of the Zen philosophy and his time that he has spent in India is minimalism, which means Steve Jobs did not really validate the extensive large scale market research that happens before startups of an organization or a product. So when he says I don't listen to customers, what he meant to say is that I don't believe in large scale sample research, which I think is antithesis to any original idea. But barring that, Steve Jobs was as glued on to the customer and as customer obsessed and centric as anybody could be. So I think one should not blindly follow Steve Jobs' prophecy of not listening to customers unless you are the ace customer or you are the alpha customer yourself. So I think that is where customer centricity is very sacrosanct to any product design.
Maybe
That was
one point that I take away from this is that one should travel and
Absolutely.
travel to uncomfortable and chaotic places to
Very
get
much.
insights into. I mean, you don't have to go back and solve a problem, but there is a kind of a mental. I mean, you learn so many things that it will come in handy at any point of time.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Absolutely.
And
Pavan, I have a question about innovation process. The word innovation process itself sounds like an oxymoron,
Yeah.
but you advocate in your book strongly about the process and discipline with quotes like spontaneity must be designed beforehand. Trust the process. What is the importance of innovation process? Why can't a group of just brilliant guys get together and innovate? What is your view?
So thanks for bringing that question up. I think that's very important from an Indian perspective because what I believe is that nobody can claim that Indians are not creative. Indians are creative. But what almost everybody would be able to arrive at as a conclusion is that we do not match our creativity with discipline. That's where the gap is. So think of yin and yang, the classic Oriental yin and yang concept. Yin and yang of creativity is chaos and discipline, chaos and order. Because without chaos, you can't have evolution. But without order, you cannot have performance. Now, if you put a bunch of highly creative people in a room, they will definitely come up with ideas. They come up with better quality and better quantity of ideas, but they do not have the ability of taking those ideas forward. And that is where the discipline of process comes in. Now, what kind of a discipline am I talking about? The discipline I'm talking about is not at the level of 30,000 feet, not at the level of micromanagement also, but at a meso level, at 10,000 feet level, where there are few very clearly laid out rules. I was just before this conversation, I was reading this brilliant book called Range, okay, by David Epstein. David Epstein won the Brackenbauer Award for 2019 Business Book of the Year. So Range is a brilliant book, and he spoke about musical prodigies. Since music is close to heart, at least for this particular conversation, so it said that the parents who produce children who are music genius versus the parents who do not on the long range, the distinctive feature between their parenting style is that the parent who produced amazing. In fact, Roger Federer, when Roger Federer's mother was coaching him to be a sports person, not necessarily a tennis player, the only rule Roger Federer was given in his entire life was never cheat. That's it. Only one rule, never cheat. What happens is when you have very few rules given to people, it allows them to liberate their thinking, learn by mistakes, but the rules are like sandbox, which you cannot circumvent. So I think discipline and process where we talk about should be few and very well laid out rules, should not be ambiguous. So good rules are few, clear, and not ambiguous. Beyond that, I think we strangle the organization with too many rules, and that is where they swing between a startup which has no rules to a bureaucracy where full of rules, where you are second guessing your own decisions over a period of time. And when the pendulum starts swinging between a startup and a bureaucratic organization, eventually it sets up with an organization which allows people enough agency that they can make mistakes, but provide the cover where if they fall back, I don't reprimand them. So, in long story short, Sri, if I have to bring the conversation back to a leadership style on the discipline of process, the only thing which I would advocate is that good leaders don't innovate. What I want to offer is that good leaders don't innovate, but rather they protect those who innovate.
excellent point. Yeah.
So you need to have rules that protect the innovators from falling out and not the rules to enable innovation. That is where the rules are. Rules cannot innovate, cannot enable innovation, but rules can protect people if they fail to innovate. That is where the rules should stop.
I think that's a brilliant point, Pavan. So just doing a rain check. We are just 1 minute to 1 o'clock, but I think with the permission of the audience, we could extend this by 10 more minutes, and we would give the audience the right to ask questions. Uh, can we see some questions there? I can see one question. Yeah, by Jay Govind. Does design thinking help in understanding social problem better? So even Sri also could take that question because you also dealt there.
Yeah, let me have Shri take it up first. Go ahead, Shri.
Definitely. I think in the book itself, Pavan has described the problem is not limited to only technology problems or what startups take up. It can be taken for anything because we are talking of a good problem to be defined and in an iterative way experiment and solve it. But also let us be cautious, there are some problems not solvable. What I liked in Pavan's book is saying that Bangalore traffic design thinking is not solvable, so don't waste your time. but social problems are solvable. Pavan, you will have more insights. You could explain.
Very much. Thank you so much. So let us look at a social problem. And one of the big social problems that we had right now is dowry system. And we have seen women push to suicide, push to almost any extent where we have a social problem. Now, if I have to look at dowry system from the lens of design thinking, what I would do. Now, the first thing that we need to, so design thinking has 5 stages. The first is inspire, the second is empathize and define, the third is ideate, the fourth is prototype and test, and the last one is scale. Because I strongly believe that scale is the only proof of innovation. Unless you scale, there is no proof that you are innovating. You might be improvising, you might be creating, but if you are not scaling, you are not innovating one bit. Coming down to dowry system, the first is inspiration. If you have to solve a problem, we need to feel the pain. You must have heard about this family from Ahmedabad who recently lost their daughter because of the dowry system. And this is once again coming up. I used to think that with increased literacy, increased modernization, socialization, some of these ills have really come out, but that doesn't seem to be the case at all. So the starting point is inspiration. Inspiration means you need to feel about the problem. The inspiration is a big ticket item. So that is the first starting point. The second is empathize. Let's understand why dowry came up at the first place. Dowry came up. I come from that belt of the country where dowry is very, very prevalent. I come from Rajasthan. And Rajasthan is very, North India is generally very prevalent when it comes to dowry. Dowry came up as a social security for the women who is going to a new family. Because the parents are concerned that will the women be able to being taken care of, and she was not earning. The only social security she had was the dowry system. It also act as a collateral. During those there was no law of land, so the only collateral that can hold that person's marriage together were dowries in the entire ecosystem. Now women have started being self-dependent, at least financially, emotionally, intellectually, and yet the dowry system plagues in. So if you start empathizing, you may be better able to understand, then define that do I have to solve the dowry system from legal perspective, educational perspective, or a social perspective. Then you experiment with certain sects of the system, run some experiments. We have had experiments in parts of the country. Good example again is in Bangladesh, how they experimented with microfinance and they could scale eventually. And once you have that, then possibly some of the systems can be scaled. The only thing which I would like to offer is that social's problem cannot be solved through legal route.
Yeah.
We have tried that again and again, we have failed.
Mm.
You cannot solve a social problem on the legal route. It has to be only solved on a behavioral route. Okay, you can't slap penalty. Like there was a very funny movement in Bangalore where there was a 1,000 rupees penalty for people spitting, and I could not understand that how do you catch somebody spitting and how do you really reprimand the guy. People who would spit on the roads would typically not have 1,000 rupees. So the whole law was so funny. I think instead of making more laws, we need to work on the psychology, and we have this very phenomenal work called nudge theory. So Richard Taylor won the Nobel Prize in economics a couple of years back for his work on nudge theory. So if you can bring nudge theory with design thinking, and I have a friend of mine in Pakistan, and I recently met him on a social media on a conversation like this, and sorry, and what I realized in that conversation is that many times what happens is in Pakistan they have managed to really bring a lot of people back to schooling by using design thinking and nudge theory. So if it can happen in Pakistan, where we have, and in the northern northwest frontier of Pakistan, where we are terrorist infested area, so I think we are having a far better situation to handle. So social problems are ripe for design thinking because they are ambiguous. People's emotions are involved. You can scale the solution very rapidly, and you can see the results yourself. So this is a good recipe for application of design
So,
thinking.
Pawan, we have two questions. One from Subbarao Dronam Raju, he's a competency head at Tech Mahindra. So he says that uh, we know how and where to learn swimming, where, what, and how. Yeah, he's asking where, what, and how we can enhance creative skills.
Okay, so there are books galore talking about creativity, but I think the first and the foremost thing that you need to do for yourself is to pick up a objective for being creative. What happens often is that it's like, why do certain people exercise? And there is a very, very interesting theory which has come from Teresa Amabile of Harvard, which is called the progress principle. And I've been a great reader and believer of the progress principle. If you look at Holocaust survivors, okay, if you look at people who have gone through the worst in their life, people who have climbed Mount Everest and that things of that sort, one thing which is very common across them is that they set their own little objectives and they measure their progress against those objectives. It's not important that the objective is great or visible or worthy, as long as you believe in the objective. So a good chunk of people do not exercise creativity is because they don't have an objective of exhibiting creativity. Once you choose an objective of exhibiting creativity, it can be a kitchen, it can be bringing up your children, it can be about better dress, better looking, writing, reading, teaching, singing, dancing, anything under the sun. Choose an objective of being creative. Put yourself under some sort of a objective measure, because what we often think is that measuring creativity will kill creativity. Routinizing creativity will kill creativity. I don't believe in that. So put an objective for yourself, start measuring yourself. And third thing is experiment. If one thing doesn't work, pick another thing. For example, Shri asked me a question which is skipped asking today. I do not know whether he would have the question or not. So Shri asked me a question that what time of the day do you find it suitable to write your book? And he is a fiction writer himself, Shri. And Benedict is has written phenomenal both on non-fiction. One was on sports and second was on C.K. Prahlad. Uh, And what I realize is that most people have a dedicated time in the day when they write, like wee hours of the day or late in the night when they're all by themselves. Like my PhD advisor, Rishikesh Krishnan, used to always say that he wakes up in the morning and he gives that slot chunk to himself to exercise his intellectual muscle. But for me, the way it works is that I set a target for myself that I have to write these many words a day, like 1,000, 1,500 words a day. And I don't go to bed till I write that. It can happen at any time in the day. Now, my creativity works very differently from Shri's creativity or that of Benedict. But the thing is, all of us have an objective within in terms of time of the day or the amount of content that you have to write. Once you fix that up, only then you will have creativity. Because creativity, my friend, cannot come without effort. It's dormant within you. It's like your muscles. If you don't exercise, it's the same muscles that may lie dormant, they may kind of become very good and will provide you the stamina. Same applies to creativity. So most people can't exercise, don't exercise creativity is because they do not give them an occasion to exercise creativity. And my parting thought on this question would be, don't expect that to come from your job. A big mistake that people often make is that they seek creativity in their job. Why? You have to seek creativity in your life. Let your job be dull and boring. Absolutely fine. I have seen many people whose job was so dull and boring that they enjoyed the dull and boring job, which they could almost sleepwalk through, so that when they come back home, they spend the next 2 hours at home doing some wonderful stuff. It can be their hobby, pastime, etc. Now, my dad used to work in government of India, and government of India jobs are notorious for being exactly that, dull, non-eventful, and he served an Indian government organization for 40 years. But I know for a fact that when he used to come back from office, he was brimming with ideas. And that is where he kind of picked up a lot of activities in his life, did it very judiciously, religiously, and that is precisely what is serving him in his retirement age.
Yeah.
So I think if you don't bring creativity early in your life, you'll have a very struggling time when you retire.
Yeah.
And the job is not the only avenue.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's another question by Manoj Kumar Parmar, the program director at Bosch. I would request Sri to take this. Could you please tell us limitations of design thinking? Could you also
Yeah,
provide?
just before that, just one thing. Shri was Manoj's boss in his previous
Oh,
avatar.
okay.
Just in that
I
perspective.
was about to say that it's better Pavan answers that. So,
Yeah. Okay.
Go ahead, Shri.
Pavan, go ahead. That's your question.
Okay. Yeah, what's the question?
So limitations to
Manoj?
design thinking.
Yeah, there are three conditions in which design thinking typically does not work. By the way, Manoj has been an amazing example of Shri's ability to foster a culture of innovation. What I saw about Shri, and that's the reason I thought it would be a great partner to have this conversation with, is that Shri, in his career at Bosch and before that at ISRO. I didn't know him then, of course, but what I have seen is that he has always fostered diversity in his team, and I was always amazed by the amount of diversity that he could pack in a given team and tolerate that and shield that. Moreover, coming to Manoj's question, there are three conditions in which design thinking does not work or reaches its limit. The first condition is if you don't have time. Design thinking never works under time constraint because design thinking necessitates you to have a divergent perspective and then a convergent perspective. Like you can't use design thinking on board Apollo 13 when you're scraping for oxygen. You can't use design thinking. You can't use design thinking while rescuing Chile miners. You can't do that. You can't use design thinking while dousing fire in a building. You can't do that. You need to use critical thinking or other methods. So first thing is you need time. Second thing is you need diversity. So you should not at least try to do the entire design thinking exercise end to end by yourself. Seek external input. Seek diversity of perspectives and opinion. That's very important. So you need time. You need diversity. Third, you need feedback. Feedback from the customer. What is very easy for you to do is to declare victory very early in the game that that's a great idea. That's a great question. Unless and until you close the loop with the customer, on the other hand, then you can't use design thinking. So design thinking is not a good practice in the absence of time, in the absence of diversity, and in the absence of a customer to validate your idea. And what I mean by customer, Manoj and others, is customer is not the one who pays you money. In design thinking, the word customer is defined as anybody whose problem you want to solve. That's a customer. Now that person could be your spouse, which is pretty often. It could be your mother, it could be your colleague, your friend, etc. So anybody whose problem you want to solve is your customer, and you need that by your side when you are in the design thinking process. So that's the only condition, barring which I think it's a very versatile method.
Okay. Any other audience question? No. So, Sri, do you have any question for him? For one?
No questions. I thought we could.
We could, yeah. So, Pavan, I think I had mentioned this point in one of our conversations on the mail. This really got me to wondering whether it is really possible, which is this line. This is connected with Titan. It's about designing experience. And you also say that spontaneity must be designed beforehand. Okay.
Yeah.
How can you, I mean, it's unthinkable. How can you design spontaneity?
Spontaneity in the perspective of the customer has to be designed by the producer beforehand. That is what spontaneity is. For example, if I look at Walt Disney, so in Disney, any Disney theme park, they are not called as customers or guests. Okay, they are. So you have these people who are the frontline employees. They are called artists and Imagineers. So what happens is that these guests and Disney has identified close to 100 moments of truth. When a person enters a theme park, to the moment he or she exits the theme park, there are close to 100 moments of truth. And every moment of truth is been engineered beforehand.
Okay.
So what I mean by spontaneity being designed beforehand is that you can look at all possible scenarios that your customer might come across. And for every single scenario, you have to look at the best case and the worst case and try to engineer it beforehand so that almost everything that you do is predictable for you, but not for the customer. And a very good example of that is Pixar
Yeah.
Pictures. And this phrase that Shri used a couple of minutes back, which is trust the process, I actually picked it up from Ed Catmull. Ed Catmull was a co-founder of Pixar along with Steve Jobs, and for a very long time was the chief of Pixar. And he wrote this brilliant book called Creativity Incorporated. In this book, it talks about that every single movie that Pixar has ever made, from the Toy Story all the way to Inside Out and Soul, pretty much follows the same process, but the outcome is absolutely different. So the point is that if as a producer you can ensure that you are designing serendipity and yet keeping at that moment of truth serendipitous for the customer, you can ensure that the customer really have a desirable experience and not an experience by accident. So that is how you can engineer it before. So that was the perspective.
Yeah. So, I mean, we'll kind of sign off with a question that I have for Sri. Sri is now moved to a totally new domain, which is excuse me, who's going to mentor the startups and consulting with the startups. The design thinking process and the mindset that work for you in business environment. Is there a tingling fear that it may not work in this as a startup in the startup?
Actually, it is the other way, Benedict. That's a good question, which made me to take, as I have written also, I'm taking the next orbit, which is moving out of the corporate life into the second career, what I call, where I'm going to be working with startups as well as working with corporates. If you look at today's interesting phenomena, just now, sometime back, we discussed the corporates want to learn the agility of the
Yeah.
startups, and startups want to scale up like corporates. So both have mutually to learn from each other. I think I have run startups within the corporate few years in the innovation, and I think I can bring that benefit. How can corporates become agile? Same way, how can startups scale up? And both can be done using the design thinking principles. For the startups, actually, even scaling business models, go to market, everything can be experimented using design thinking. And for the corporates, definitely how to apply the design thinking principle to solve a right problem with the right product. So I believe there is a good value possible in the
In fact,
industry.
one thing I learned from the book, Pavan, is that it's not so much the price, the design that you become a winner in the market, but it's your business model.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's a learning for me there. Uh, okay, so uh, since we don't have any audience question, we'll uh, sign off with one. Since this is a literature uh, mini fest, I would call it, New Book, New Chat, which have started. It's an initiative, it's a series to bring in new authors and new books for conversations, connecting with the readers. Uh, Let me sign off. I mean, Pawan, you could end it with this uh, by sharing with us how, since you've read so many books and you're such a voracious reader, uh, your advice to the audience to how in the design space, okay, let's limit it to design space. What is the kind of reading that they can do to really broaden their horizon?
So, some of the things which have helped me personally is to read multiple books simultaneously.
Oh, that's a new thing, yeah.
Yeah, that's something I have discovered. So earlier I used to ensure that I'm only reading one book at a time. But now I have made a habit that I read three books at a time.
Excellent.
And the three books have to be three different genres.
Mm-hmm.
So the three books which I'm reading right now is Flow by Mihail Csikszentmihalyi. The second is Choice by Edith Edgar. So Choice is a very good book where she talks about Holocaust. So she survived the concentration camps, Holocaust, and she rebuilt her life. It's a very, very touching book.
Mm-hmm.
And the third book is Range by David Epstein.
Mm-hmm.
So by reading three books of three different genres, you are able to really increase your own width of learning. That's very important. And I was reading Tim Hartford, the undercover economist, and Tim Hartford said that slow burning multitasking is the secret of creativity.
Wow.
What I mean by slow burning multitasking is that instead of packing your second with multiple tasks, you pack your day with multiple tasks.
Mm-hmm.
So it is parallel processing, but on the range, long range, it looks like you have packed your day with multiple things. So the first reading habit is always read multiple books simultaneously, or try to, and keep the genre different
Mm-hmm.
so that you can start connecting the genre.
Mm-hmm.
The second thing which I would bring to the table is always read a book with the intent of teaching it to somebody.
The intent of
Don't read it for reading,
intent of giving it a
teaching, teaching it to
yeah,
somebody.
right.
Read with the intent of teaching and not read with the intent of reading.
Oh, okay.
Because when you have this obligation of teaching or paraphrasing the book to somebody, you are doubly sure about what you grasp from the book.
Mm-hmm.
So that is another important insight which I would want to offer. And the third thing is never read a book without a pen or a pencil.
Yes.
Because scribbling down, and that is where I'm still a fan of reading hardbound
Yeah.
books, because on the margins, you can write a lot of annotations and you can start personalizing your perspective. Because when you write something down, it covers the loop of seeing, thinking, and writing tactile. So this tactile writing, which touches your fingertips, is very, very integral part of ensuring that you have remembered, because you have a kinesthetic memory. You don't have this image memory. You have a kinesthetic memory with your hand, which is often we use in typing.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
typing is a kinesthetic memory. So I think these three tips, if we can have, and thanks to Amazon, reading has become so pervasive because they brought the books cost
Yes.
down. Kindle is phenomenally sort of fertile ground for you to discover new genre
Yeah.
and new books. So I think more and more people should read and possibly write.
Yes.
So that's my view.
Yes.
Thanks for that great question once again.
Thank you.
Very
Thank
useful.
you. I just want to close it with one quote of Peter Thiel that you have quoted in your book. The most important element in design thinking, or I'm sure in every part of life, which is that brilliant thinking is rare, but courage is in even shorter supply than genius.
Yes,
So I would attribute uh, everything to courage. I think if one has the courage, he can do anything. Right.
very much.
On that note,
Great one.
I would like. Sorry.
I would also just close it. Thanks a
Yes,
lot, Benedict. And it was a pleasure talking to you, reading your book. It's a brilliant book, comprehensive one, covering
thank
really
you.
all the aspects of design thinking with really examples from India as well as the practitioners. You loved it. I hope the audience also would love this book and
Thank
wish
you.
you all the best. And thanks once again for Bangalore Business Literature
Thank you.
Festival.
Thanks, Pavan.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you. Thanks,
Thank
Pavan.
you.
Thanks to the audience. We would put this up on social media handles so that a lot more people can watch this. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks to Airmeet as well for making this happen. Thanks, Kabir.